find consisted of a chalice, a large paten, a liturgical strainer and a bronze basin which had covered them. This had corroded over the years and deposited a layer of copper salts on the objects beneath. This photograph is the earliest record of the find, taken in the Webb house that Sunday evening. Michael Webb and his son had driven from Clonmel and walked across the bog to the site.
I was looking down in the hole at what I thought at that stage were kitchen utensils, and very gaudy ones at that. They were colours, beautiful colours, blues and greens and gold and silver. And I don't know how long I was looking down there before it suddenly struck me what I was looking at. Now, I'd seen the art chalice in the museum years ago, and it just came to me that this was a chalice. And I bent down and I picked it up. And the gold was beautiful. It was still as bright, I suppose, as the day it went down.
It was here in the middle of a desolate Tipperary bog that the greatest archaeological discovery of the century took place. This is the area known as the Island, an area of grassland rising from the Largo bog, perhaps 5 miles from Thurles, 7 miles from Cashel. And it was here in late January that an amateur archaeologist using an electronic scanner discovered and dug up golden ecclesiastical art. And the location has been revealed despite strict security by the National Museum. The handful of people who necessarily knew about it were bound to silence. But all that was circumvented by a man from the area who dropped into his local newspaper office and told what he knew. The 60 or so acres of land which make up the island are jointly owned by this man, Mr. John O'Leary, a dairy farmer, and his neighbour, Mr. Dennis O'Brien. And while they are pleased that the treasure has been found, they are not happy with the way in which the discovery took place.
I am absolutely enthralled at the find as far as the state is concerned, but it is the aspect of the find, somebody using a metal detector and using a spade and shovel on my property without permission. That is what I'm annoyed at.
The identity of the mystery man who found the Derrynaflan chalice has been one of the best-kept secrets of recent times. It was just 2.5 months ago that Mr. Michael Webb and his 16-year-old son Michael Jr. made what has been described as the archaeological find of the century at this spot.
Well, my son and I decided we'd go out for the afternoon. It was his half-term break, and we just went out and wandered around. It all happened very quickly, about 20 minutes. And got a signal. My metal detector, we were using metal detectors, and mine had a loose connection. And I asked him to come along and just check. And he got a very strong signal. And we established there was an area about 2 feet across. It could have been mineralization, an old basin or something like that, disintegrated. But we decided to just open up, have a look, see if there was anything worthwhile. We'd found 2 or 3 bits of metal before. Wasn't worth anything. Never have found anything worth anything.
Until then?
Until that day, yes, the 17th of February.
Well, how are the articles actually placed underground?
Buried, I'd say, in a hurry, carefully stacked underneath the ground, about 2 feet under the ground.
When did you realise that you'd made an important find?
Not until we uncovered it. And not until I actually reached in the hole and took the chalice out. The gold work even then stood out remarkably well. It was beautiful. Then I realized it was something very special.
Death
Signal. Good strong signal. Metal underneath.
Can you tell what kind of metal it is?
Yes. I've got 4 different selectors on this one. That's a general. Change it. The positive signal is not ironed. There's a slight rejection there. Means it's probably aluminium can top, something like that. Well, that could be silver or gold.
The lure of gold has urged men since the world was inhabited. It is the only metal that does not tarnish with time. Early history glows with its significance. Gold reflects the sun, the life-giving mark of the seasons. It is a metal which has been worshipped as no other. Across the known world from the earliest times, it's been worshipped and used to worship. The Incas, the Sun King, the Egyptians, the Celts. On a date in February 1979, Michael Webb, a Clonmel businessman, and his son, also Michael, were prospecting in the region of Killinall in South Tipperary. In a remote area stands the monastery of Derrynaflan, the oak wood of the Flans, so named after monks named Flan or Flananan or Flown, who set up a monastery there sometime in 700 AD, and that was only 300 years after Patrick had brought the Christian faith to this island. Even then, the new church was rent with differences, and there is a view which says that the 3 monks, whose new Christian name each was Flan, had gone to this place on a wooded island to renew the spirituality and holiness of the new faith. The place was Largo, from even earlier inhabitation of worship. Afterwards, such was the rooted sense with which they absolved the new faith among those who made pilgrimage to it, that for 1,000 years it became known as Derrynaflan, or in Latin, Roboratum Flanorum, or in English, Derrynaflan.
I've been hunting over this bit of land for a long time. You can see it for miles around Green Island in the middle of this big brown bog. You can see the bog stretches for miles. We came up to the church here. First thing we did was clean it up. There was a lot of old cans and broken glass around. I went out through the other side of the church and started metal detecting. Mike went the other way. I got 2 or 3 signals, marked them, moved on. And then I got a very good one, just outside here. But there was something a bit wrong with the machine, a loose connection, I suppose. So I called Mike over and I said, look, just try there and see what you think. So he came over and tried it. Beautiful signal. Large round area, about 2 feet across. I went back and got a small little hand trowel and dug the 2 or 3 other pieces, 2 or 3 other signals, cartridge case, a couple of bits of metal, that's all. So then we started digging this small little hole, about 4 inches across, 2 or 3 inches down. Nothing. Made it a bit bigger. Nothing. Tried the detector on it again, and we got a fine signal. So we lifted off the turf of about 1.5 foot across and started digging down. And we came across a bluey-green piece of metal, rounded. It looked like a buried shell. So I said to Mike, be careful here. I don't like the look of it. We picked away with our fingers.
We didn't really know what it was. I mean, for all we know, actually Daddy thought, when we had it half dug up, he thought it was a bomb from the Troubles. I mean, we hadn't a clue what the hell it was.
Looked like the edge of a bowl or a basin. So we were quite happy at that we'd found an old feeding bowl. So we picked away, and with our fingers and with the trowel, and the hole got bigger. The basin got bigger. And I think it must have been 2.5 hours later, and we were exhausted. Rain was coming down. The light was going, We were muddy, we were tired, but we finally got right down to the bottom and we were able to put our fingers right round the bowl. Mike got one side of the hole, I got the other, and said, okay, right, now we'll lift it up nice and easy so that we won't break it. Because there was a bit of damage done on the bowl. It deteriorated and was flaking away. And we lifted it out nice and easy. Seemed extraordinarily heavy. Put it down beside the hole. And Mike picked something up and said, hey, look, Dad, look at this. And it looked like a bit of coloured glass. I was looking down in the hole, and I saw what I thought was a lot of old kitchen utensils. Bowl, strainer. And for some reason or other, very disappointed about it. Why I should be, I'm not quite sure, because we hadn't expected anything under the basin anyway. And then I bent down, and I picked up the bowl. And it suddenly came to me what it was. Mike said to me, what's wrong, Dad? I said, look at this. Look at it. I said, that is a chalice. And the only other one I've seen is in the National Museum.
He was in utter amazement, and so was I, because there he was, as white as a sheet, holding this chalice, you know, big huge chalice in his two hands. And he was as white as a sheet, and the two of us, God, didn't know where we were.
Mike gave a whoop. Have we really found it, he said. Have we found it? I said, yes. And he gave a fair imitation of Mike Murphy dancing. You could see the gold then. You could see all the intricate gold work, wire work, beautiful hammered silver work. It was unbelievable. We looked at the other pieces. Mike picked up the strainer. We looked underneath the basin, and we then saw the pattern. There were pieces of gold dropping all over the place. The pattern was in bits. There was a wire, an iron wire thing that held everything to pieces. It had burst open the pattern, and the glass studs had fallen out, and the gold filigree panels had fallen out. So we wondered what to do next. For one wild moment I was going to put everything back into the hole and come back another day, because the light was going and we had 2 miles of the bog to cross. So anyway, we picked up all the bits and pieces, put them into the chalice in, and the pattern into the big bowl, and then filled in the hole. We left 1 or 2 pieces in the hole. We just did not have time to investigate everything. So there we were, loaded up with the bronze bowl, the chalice, pattern, all the bits and pieces of gold, the metal detectors. The light was fading, the rain was coming down, and we staggered 2 miles across the bog back to the car.
It ranks in importance with the Ardagh Chalice and the Tara Brooch and the crozier of the Abbess of Clonmacnoise. It is one of the major finds of the early Christian period in Ireland.
Would anything like it be in any other country?
Not of that particular kind, because in Ireland these works of art are of this early historic, early Christian period. In England you will have Anglo-Saxon art, such as the Sutton Hoo ship burial and other things of that kind, but it is distinctively Irish-orientated ornament.
What does it tell us about the people and the religious practices at the time?
Well, Ireland has been known in the past as the island of saints and scholars, and admittedly not all were saints and not all were scholars. Nevertheless, in Ireland in the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th centuries, there were many monasteries and churches, and in these churches there would have been church vestments and church vessels. And we have, from the last century, the Ardagh Chalice, but now we have a second chalice, and this brings to mind the fact, which we should all know, in that every monastery and every church in Ireland at that time would have had a reasonably good chalice and other vessels, and this is beginning to prove the point. And I would expect that there are many more chalices of this kind in Ireland, waiting to be recovered, but hopefully not by means of metal detectors.
On the other hand, if Michael Webb hadn't been using a metal detector, this find may not have come to light for an awful long time yet.
That is quite true. The possibility would be that it would not be recovered for perhaps 100 years until that site was scientifically excavated. On the other hand, we feel that that particular find, which was covered by a bronze basin and was away from the acids of the soil, would have remained and would have been preserved and would have awaited recovery in a systematic excavation. Nevertheless, Michael Webb, having found the chalice and the pattern, did the right thing, reported the matter to the National Museum, not only reported it, but brought it here on the day following its discovery, and as a result we were then in a position to go back to the actual site of discovery and to recover, in the course of excavation, a number of other parts of the actual pattern. And this has been very useful from not only a scientific point of view, but from a general point of view, that we were able to recover the totality of that hoard from the earth.
The question of compensation is a thorny one, given that the state has certain rights in the matter of what is regarded as treasure trove, and given that in most cases finders are happy to have an object of beauty repose in the National Museum, and that they are given some amount in recognition. But how to define that amount? On the open market of international dealing, such a rarefied find as the Derrynaflan hoard would fetch as much as someone is prepared to pay for it. That could be £1 million, it could be more. But given again that in this case it would be illegal for whoever is adjudged owner to export the chalice and the hoard without a licence issued by the relevant government minister. I say adjudged owner, for there is now a definite conflict of views between the National Museum and Michael Webb as to the legal ownership of the Derrynaflan hoard.
Do you feel you've been adequately compensated for the find?
That has not been discussed yet. It's still in the hands of the museum.
What is your attitude to the chalice and possible compensation?
Well, we are claiming the goods as ours as of the moment. The museum hasn't claimed it. When they claim it, or when they make a claim to it, we can then discuss compensation.
The significance of the Derrynaflan chalice and pattern has been such, extracted, as it were, not only from the Irish civilization, but from the golden age of Western European civilization, that the scholars and experts of the international art fraternity have shown a keen interest in it. The chalice is now in the British Museum to be conserved and restored, a process that may take upwards of a year. Before its arrival there, the keeper of such antiquities discussed their pleasure in being allowed to work on the Irish treasure.
I was also pleased to see that it had not been seriously distorted. And this is because, of course, it wasn't actually buried in a lot of soil and hadn't been trodden on, and indeed had been rescued very quickly. We are, in the museum, of course, quite used to having to deal with precious metal objects which have been trampled upon by oxen or by careless workers, and we can, if need be, bring these back to shape. But I was relieved to find that we wouldn't have to do anything very drastic in reshaping the object. There's a certain amount of corrosion around the surface, some of which has come from the cauldron which covered it. This we will be able to remove without much difficulty. There is a certain amount of interesting material sticking to it, and there's a certain amount of fixing loose material, and there may be a little bit of putting in missing sections to produce the correct aesthetic effect. But the chalice as such is largely complete. It's the other objects that may need a little bit more imagination to put them into a presentable form, the pattern particularly.
Hannah Lane, Chief Conservation Officer, Metal Section of the Museum, had previously restored two other jewelled glories of that period, the Ardagh chalice and the Tara brooch.
It will be very different in that both the objects you've mentioned came to us having been previously cleaned. The Ardagh chalice was cleaned by a jeweller, I think, when it was first found and been completely taken apart. I don't know about the Tara brooch, but it had been cleaned. And therefore the main work was on the scientific examination of how it was made and its technology. The actual conservation was just removing less than a century of tarnish, dirt and grease from handling, which, though painstaking, was relatively simple. Whereas these objects will be completely new from the ground and will have all their, not only just dirt from the ground, but all their corrosion, etc., and will be revealing things that perhaps nobody has seen before. So whereas the others were a secondary thing, that it was doing it for the second time, these will be completely new. So it'll be more exciting and, of course, much more time-consuming. It's a very beautiful object, both to look at. The effect will be very beautiful when it's finished, but also it is very dirty, and therefore will come up and you'll be really able to see what work you have done. There will be something to show for it. And certainly the conservation staff are very much looking forward to seeing it and working on it.
It is often said, without being either mystical or nonsensical about it, well, perhaps being a bit mystical, that the discovery of sacred objects like the chalice, or objects similar that have been used in such consecrated worship, that their re-emergence carries some trust of responsibility. In the case of the Derrynaflan chalice, the view has been put that the way in which it was used, passed out among the early Christians to be drunk from, held with the two handles among the worshippers, that early rite could be restored again in a church of all the faithfuls, reunited from the schism and differences which ravaged belief in the 1,000 years after the chalice was made.
What we did was we put everything into the bronze basin, and I think we put a plastic bag or something under the basin itself, so that, because there was a few holes in the basin, just in case anything might fall out. And we took turns in carrying that over the bog, and there was a person behind then. One of us went behind to see if anything fell, which anything didn't. And Dad brought it home then, and he packed them in boxes with, paper and all that, so they wouldn't get damaged. I was gone back to school that night, I think.
And did you tell anybody about it here?
No, I didn't. I told a tree, actually. Big tree standing up in front of me, anyway. Went up to it and told him. Quite stupid, actually.
And do you still go metal detecting?
Yeah. I was just out there last week. We went out. We had a very enjoyable day. Very wet day. Very wet indeed, in fact. And didn't find anything very much. Found a horseshoe.
This is art of such purity and quality that its brilliance has been undiminished in over 1,000 years. Wrought by the monks of a tiny settlement in a bog near Cashel, every stroke and curve was in praise of God, inspiring its creators to new heights. This is the Derrynaflan chalice, which showed the art of the Irish of 1,000 years ago to be of greater sophistication than had previously been thought. It had lain hidden in the grounds of a tiny, now ruined church at Derrynaflan, about 10 miles from Cashel, and that for hundreds of years, possibly to save it from raiders. And just 3 years ago, it was rediscovered by a Clonmel man using a metal detector. Now it has been restored by the British Museum and put on display. But in Dublin, not in the area which made it and in which it was found. And that has now annoyed local people who hold that it should be on display here in what is possibly our best-known ancient building, the Rock of Cashel, which is visited by thousands of tourists every year. And the ideal location, it is claimed, would be in Cormac's Chapel. In that way, it would give something to the area which made it, would help the local economy, and would be easily accessible. And anyway, why must everything be in Dublin, they ask? T.J. Marr, member of the European Parliament.
I think this nation has got Dublinitis. There's now more than 1/3 of the total population of the Republic living in there with massive pressure on structures and facilities, whereas in many other parts of the country there are too few people. Now, I'm not saying that bringing the Derrynaflan chalice to Cashel is going to change that situation, but it would be a gesture by the authorities towards a little bit of decentralisation, necessary decentralisation. Now, I believe the chalice could be adequately displayed in Cashel. It would be easy for people to get at it. It is on a main trunk road between Dublin and Cork. I don't think there would be any problem about security because, for instance, if it was in Cormac's Chapel, it's a virtual fortress. It could be guarded at night and by day. Indeed, we have plenty of people who are looking for employment in Cashel who would be only too ready to be security guards and guard the chalice while it's here. Now, I'm not suggesting it would be here the whole year. It could be here during the tourist season and then, if necessary, brought to other sites in the country.
We're absolutely delighted. Very good news indeed. I wouldn't say it's unexpected. Honesty finally pays, I think.
Is there a danger that, irrespective of the financial benefit this means to you, that it will be swallowed up in legal costs in the end of the day?
Well, we don't know anything about that end of it at the moment. We understand it is being appealed, and we just have to wait to see what the final result is going to be. But we're still confident that the judgment will stand.
Relates to the matter of treasure trove, and according to the judge's ruling, treasure trove does not exist in Ireland. But we would hold as a National Museum that it does and did, insofar as that the British government handed over, shall we say, the agency of treasure trove to the Royal Irish Academy just about 100 years ago. And the Royal Irish Academy exercised that right down the years, down into the 40s and 50s, and then the National Museum subsumed, shall we say, that right. So we would hold that it still exists, but then that will be a matter, I should imagine, for Supreme Court judgment.
And you have decided you're going to recommend that the decision is appealed to the Supreme Court?
Yes, that is correct.
Well, Mr. Webb was offered £10,000 in compensation for handing over the treasure trove, or the hoard. Was that not a paltry amount, considering the value of the hoard itself?
Well, I think that you must take it that, first of all, £10,000 is a sum, as it were, that is not necessarily the value of the material. And it is an award that is made by the state to somebody. The amount doesn't really matter, shall we say, on one hand, and the state may well have taken into consideration the fact that he had been trespassing on others' land and that he had been using a metal detector contrary to the Monuments Act. That is one part of the situation. The other part is that the state and all states do take into consideration the circumstances of finding and the method of finding and so forth in relation to awards that are made.
The Treasury Gallery marks a new era for the National Museum. It features a permanent display to the highest international standards of the best of Irish antiquities. Among them the Ardagh Chalice, the Tara Brooch and the Cross of Cong. Even the Derrynaflan Hoard is here. It's still in the custody of the museum, pending an appeal against a court decision to return the treasures to their finders. Museum Director Brendan O'Riordan.
We have got a new gallery which has been put together by the Office of Public Works, and in this we have special lighting, and as well as that we have special new display cases, and also there are information panels, and as well we have produced a number of brochures and posters to go with the actual material.
Last July, the High Court ruled that the hoard, which was found at Derrynaflan Island in County Tipperary in February 1980, should be returned to the Clonmel father and son who found it using a metal detector. However, the state claimed that an allowance should be made by the Webbs to take account of the restoration done by the National Museum. In his judgment today, Mr Justice Blaney said the state should only be paid £25,000. He said it was clear that nearly all the work done by the National Museum was carried out after the Webbs had lodged their claim for the return of the hoard, and so expenditure on that account could not be considered. The Justice said that on the basis of evidence presented to him, he had no difficulty in valuing the hoard at £5.5 million. He said that it should be returned to the Webbs less £25,000, or they could recover its value from the state. The state was given leave to appeal.
The Derrynaflan hoard was found by Michael Webb and his son Michael Jr. near this 5th century ruin at Derrynaflan Island in County Tipperary on the 17th of February 1980. Using a metal detector, they unearthed the now famous chalice and a number of other artefacts. After sending the objects to the National Museum, the Webbs were offered and refused a thank you reward of £10,000. However, the two farmers on whose land the hoard was found accepted their award of £25,000 each. In July of this year, the High Court ruled that the chalice belonged to the Webbs and should be returned to them. But what of the implications of today's High Court ruling? Dr. Brendan O'Riordan.
Well, the first implication, as I would see it, is that anybody trespassing, and particularly with a metal detector, can move in on any landowner's or farmer's property and remove material and, in fact, be paid for it, and thereby leaving the landowner at the loss of that material.
And if the Supreme Court were to uphold this latest ruling, would the state be prepared to pay the £5.5 million to the Webbs?
In such a situation, the state would certainly pay, insofar as that the National Museum is the repository of all the nation's treasures as such. But I think that the ruling, which is a technical ruling, insofar as that it deals with that somebody left in a parcel, shall we say, to the National Museum, and then sometime later asked for that parcel back. So that is what they call a bailor bailee situation in legal terms. And I would consider that the total ruling, and I hope that I'm not, as it were, in any way out of court in this, but I would think that the whole situation at this stage is rather absurd.
Meanwhile, tonight, the finders of the chalice, Michael Webb and his son Michael Jr., were back at their Clonmel home celebrating their latest court victory. Alistair Jackson put it to Mr. Webb that the chalice really belonged to the Irish nation and should in fact be left with them.
I think, yes, that is quite correct. It is a national treasure. It should be in the National Museum. Objects like this should not be allowed to leave the country.
But you feel the market value should be paid, obviously?
Of course. People will find things. People should, if they want to sell them, and the state require these objects, yes.
Finally,
should be paid market value.
The Derrynaflan chalice and hoard was found on the 17th of February 1980, and this week the High Court said the chalice alone was worth over £5 million. It was found on this land belonging to Tipperary farmer Dennis O'Brien. And tonight, after a meeting with his solicitor and his auctioneer, he said that he intends to claim possession of the hoard. But Michael Webb and his son, who found the hoard, are now in possession of it. And this week the court said they were entitled to ownership or £5.5 million, whichever they wish to take. Dennis O'Brien says they found it on his land without permission, and he's prepared to face a lengthy legal battle to acquire it.
The owner of the little island of land in the middle of a bog near Cashel, Dennis O'Brien, says he's been plagued with treasure hunters since the High Court put a £5.5 million value on the Derrynaflan hoard and then ordered its return by the National Museum to the Webb family of Clonmel, who found it with the aid of a metal detector 6 years ago. Mr. O'Brien said he found the medieval grave of the legendary figure the Gobbaun Ser dug up and bones had been scattered about. The gravestones had been thrown aside, and today National Museum archaeologist Derrynaflan described the act as one of appalling desecration, in which vandals were undoubtedly digging for treasure in the wake of the £5.5 million court award.
The point must be made clear that this metal detecting activity and any other treasure hunting, we don't know if a metal detector was involved in this case, the point must be made that this is an antisocial habit, that these people who are engaging in this kind of activity are doing so for their own self-interest and not for any interest in history or archaeology or anything else. And the people who lose out are the people of Ireland whose heritage this is.
The Gardaí were informed today, but even if the culprits were found, the maximum fine which can be imposed by a court is £50. And today Mr. O'Brien said he would fight the court decision to award the Derrynaflan treasure to the Webb family.
The state has treated me very well, I thought, but I'm angry since there's nothing only people come and digging with detectors, and it's the same as no man's land now.
So do I gather you were happy with the settlement that you made with the state?
I made it, but I didn't think that it was worth that much money, and I was treated very unfair that he could get the chalice, which I'm way more entitled to that chalice and that money more so than him. There's no landowner happy now would lads going around the detectors, and there's no law in the country if they can go away and take away and steal, same as taking cattle off of the land, or anything else I maintain.
After the medieval grave of the legendary figure, the Gobon Ser, on the Derrynaflan site was dug up and destroyed, that the landowner, Mr Dennis O'Brien, last month took legal action to keep trespassers off his land. The grave was a few yards from the spot where the multi-million-pound Chalice and Hoard were found 6 years ago by Mr Michael Webb of Clonmel and his son. At Clonmel Circuit Court today, Mr O'Brien's legal representative sought the continuance of an injunction to prevent trespass on the lands. And the representative told the court that Mr O'Brien had suffered such stress in the wake of the finding of the treasure that he was now receiving mental treatment in St Luke's Psychiatric Hospital in Clonmel and could not himself attend the court. Mr O'Brien's solicitor, Mr Kieran Cleary, told the court that a witness could be produced, a Mr Pat Hurley, living near the site, who would say that he had seen Mr Jack O'Leary on the Derrynaflan lands and had in fact seen him digging on the grave of the Gobon Ser. However, the court would also be told that Mr O'Leary, who is named in the injunction to restrain him from trespass, denied the claim and had never been on the lands. Mr O'Leary had been part owner of those lands until he sold out to Mr O'Brien after the finding of the treasure, when both accepted £25,000 each from the National Museum in settlement. The court adjourned until tomorrow to give Mr O'Brien's representatives time to produce the witness, Mr Pat Hurley, and the court will then decide whether to continue the injunction against Mr O'Leary or to end it. The case had been adjourned from yesterday so that a vital witness, horse trainer Pat Hurley, could give evidence. Today he told the court that while exercising a horse on the Derrynaflan site at 8:30 on the morning of December 14 last, he saw 3 men digging up the medieval grave of the legendary figure, the Gobon Ser, and they ran off. But he identified one of them as being Mr John O'Leary, former part owner of the land. When he later went to Mr O'Leary's house to ask about statements that the wife of the man who is now the sole owner of that land, Mr Dennis O'Brien, was dead and that his dog had been shot, he was met by Mr O'Leary carrying a double-barrel shotgun. Mr O'Leary told the court that he only became aware of an anti-trespass injunction taken out against him by Mr O'Brien when he read about it in the newspapers. Today's case sought a continuance of that injunction. Mr O'Leary denied interfering with the Gobon Ser grave and denied having been near the site in over 2 years. And a Garda witness said he believed Mr O'Leary had nothing to do with the Gobon Ser incident. Mr O'Leary said he produced a shotgun because the witness, Mr Hayden, called to his house at 1:30 in the morning, and the landowner, Mr O'Brien, was in the farmyard of his house drunk and causing a racket. There had been several robberies in the area, he said, and the safety of his family had been his prime concern. In giving his decision, Judge Frank Rowe said he had to decide if Mr O'Leary had in fact been one of the men seen at the grave of the Gobon Ser. He said evidence had been given that it was dark at the time. He said he believed Mr O'Leary was a gentleman who was telling the truth, and that an honest mistake had been made in the matter of identification. Judge Rowe ended the injunction against Mr O'Leary, while warning those who might trespass on such lands that they faced severe fines.
In a reserve judgment handed down last December, the High Court ruled that the Clonmel businessman Michael Webb and his son Michael Jr. were the rightful owners of the Derrynaflan hoard. The famous chalice was found by the Webbs at Littleton Bog, Derrynaflan Island, County Tipperary in February 1980. The Webbs were given the choice by the court of either keeping the famous hoard or taking £5.5 million. But in the case now before the Supreme Court, counsel for the Attorney General on behalf of the National Museum is arguing that the hoard represents treasure trove and belongs to the state, and that artefacts found on private property belong to the landowner rather than the trespasser. The case is expected to last 3 days, and the reserve judgment is expected to be handed down later in the year.
Almost a year ago to the day, the Webbs drank champagne and believed they owned the Derrynaflan hoard or were millionaires 5 times over. Finders keepers, said the newspaper headlines. But the Supreme Court today reversed the High Court decision. The Derrynaflan hoard belonged to the state it held. The Webbs were entitled only to £25,000 each for finding it, less than 1% of its value. When the father and son found the hoard in the bog 7 years ago with a metal detector, they immediately handed it to the National Museum. But they refused an award of £10,000. Are they glad it's over today?
Thank God it is over. We're delighted. to get it over and finished with. It was nearly 8 years of hard work, and we're delighted with the judgment.
But it was his admission afterwards that he would have accepted £25,000 as a reward for finding the chalice that raised questions here about whether or not this case should ever have come to court.
I don't think this case should have come to court at all. I think it was quite unnecessary. It could have been settled very early on.
The National Museum, in that case, made a recommendation to our betters, shall we say, or to our departments, the Department of Education, and eventually that would go to the Department of Finance. And somewhere along the line, the actual amount which we had suggested, and all we were empowered to do was to suggest, that was written down, as it were.
How much did you suggest?
Well, I may not be at liberty to actually say, but it would not be very different from what the Chief Justice and the Supreme Court have now agreed.
A 12th century writer said that such artistry must have been the result of the work not of men, but of angels. The Derrynaflan treasures lent by the National Museum of Ireland form the centrepiece of an exhibition which the British Museum is calling the Work of Angels. The British Museum had helped in the restoration of the Derrynaflan chalice. It's the first time that the Derrynaflan church vessels have been seen outside Ireland.
It's very remarkable, and the pattern and the ladle are outstanding in the quality of the workmanship. Very beautiful in their own right and the highest quality.
The exhibition was opened by the Ambassador to London, Andrew O'Rourke. It's the largest collection of Dark Ages Celtic art seen in Britain. The National Museum of Scotland has lent items dating from the time of St. Columba, and there are treasures from museums in France, Italy and Scandinavia.
This is the site where the Derrynaflan Hoard was found in the 1980s. It's a slight high point in the middle of a bog, and That's Slievenamon in the distance there. But all around they're extracting peat. So that gives you an idea that in the, we'll say, first millennia, that it was essentially an island in wintertime, or any time where there was a lot of rain, that this place basically became completely separated from everything. It has a church on it. In the 13th century, a building was put here, and this is a Norman stone structure, but it's likely that it replaced something much more wooden, shall we say. You certainly would not expect what came out of this place, that's for definite, as far as the quality of the artwork and the metalwork. This is the view of the 13th century church, or at least what's left of it, and some sort of an impression of just how high up we are. We're basically about 50-60 feet above the bog. That brown thing is the bog, which is more or less level. In the distance between the two, there's a Norman fort, Norman keep, and there's a gap there which brings us down to the river that flows through it, which brings it into the lower area of the shore. Behind the gable of the church is Slievenamon. This centres on virtually everything that's in Tipperary, or particularly South Tipperary. It's visible virtually from everywhere.